Hi, folks. So welcome. My name is Twin Nguyen, and on behalf of the North County LGBTQ Center, as well as the California Department of Social Services, want to welcome you all to this forum. My work is a program manager for the Stop the Hate grant. And so I've been lucky enough to work with the North County LGBT Center in this particular effort in looking at ways in which we can look to support folks better who have experienced hate crimes or hate incidences. And so a little background on the grant. So last year, the California Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus, as well as the Commission on Asian American or Asian Pacific Islander American Affairs, saw the increase in Asian American Pacific Islander hate, as well as because of the shooting in Atlanta, had advocated for a statewide funding and was able to secure $165 million dedicated to looking at ways in which we can reduce hate and hate incidences in our communities and across California. And so hate crimes and hate incidences aren't new. And within the Black community, it historically has always been there and across all of our communities. But across the state last year, there was a 32.6% increase overall in terms of hate crimes. And that is to say that number is still underreported, right? But knowing that for those that do report it, and that is for hate crimes alone and not accounting for hate incidences. And we saw a 177% increase in the Asian American Pacific Islander community, a 12% increase in the Black community, and a 42.8% increase in the LGBTQIA community. And so we see this and seeing that this work has to be intersectional, and this work requires all of us and a lot of us to kind of begin to think about how do we work together and collectively to reduce hate and hate incidences across our community, and how do we support folks who experience that in our everyday. So I want to thank the LGBTQ Resource Center for taking the lead and doing some of this work, and I know that some of you in the room have been doing this work continuously, and so we want to open this back up to the community to have this conversation, and want to introduce Angela Jackson, who has been hired on in the center to really lead some of this work in North County, and she'll share a couple words as well as introduce our panel for today.
Thank you, Twin. Thank you. As she mentioned, my name is Angela Jackson, and I'm grateful to have been entrusted with this duty, this title to and help support this incredibly crucial work that the center is doing. My role again is the Stop the Hate Program Coordinator at the North County LGBTQ Resource Center, just down the street in Oceanside. So thank you all for. Sorry, Leo. There you go. Is that better? I feel like it was kind of going in and out. Is that all right there?
Yeah. That sounds good. Hold on. Let me just. Please stand by. Wait.
It's a little bit, I think, easier
Okay.
for myself. Maybe that's better. No, yes?
Yes.
Is that better?
It's a little bit like,
Hello, how's that? Okay, thank you, yes. So again, thank you so much everyone for joining us today as we kind of commemorate United Against Hate Week. This is kind of the culmination of it. It started on Sunday and it ends today. We appreciate the time that you've taken out of your day to just be here with us and to support this incredible and important topic. And so to help us with that, you can see before you, this actually represents almost 100 years of social justice and advocacy right in front of you. These folks here, these ones who have served those who have experienced hate crimes, those folks that cannot actually fight. These are the ones that fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. And so you'll see just a wide variety, a very diverse representation on our panel today, and we've we will allow them to introduce themselves in just a moment. But as you see, this cross-section here really represents a vast majority of who hate crimes are directed against. People of color, religious minorities, LGBTQ people, and as large as this panel is, it's easy to see the glaring omissions. We have missed a few. So there are absolutely folks that are not at the table at the moment. We've got, as Twin was mentioning, our AAPI friends, our Indigenous friends, a younger student population, and all that means is really we just have to do this again. So hopefully that's in the budget. Max, we can do another panel with all these folks. And so of course trans folks as well. Trans folks, which again is, we can talk a little bit more about that later, but I know that we don't have some trans folks listed on our panel here. And so before we begin and move a little bit further, actually Yusuf is just going to share a few words as well about another who wasn't able to join us here today.
Do I come there or stand up?
I think you should have a mic.
Oh, right,
If you'd
right.
like.
Okay. We do?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. All right. My name is Yusuf Miller. I'm with the NAACP chapter, North County chapter of the NAACP. I'm with the San Diego Unified, the San Diego Anti-Hate Crimes Coalition, and many others. I won't bore you with that until it's my turn to speak. But what I'm going to say is that there is a member who was beloved by our community who could not be here today, who would be here today if he was able, but we lost him in a health-related tragedy. His name is Mustafa Nizam. You probably all know him or run across him, either in East County or South Bay or North County or Orange County or LA County. You find him standing up for social justice throughout this county and others. I want to take time to give a moment of silence to his memory that he would be here if he was able, and to honor and respect his wonderful wife who is also here on our panel. So let's take a moment to reflect on the service of Nazim. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. So this topic of hate crimes is unfortunately very relevant today. Like, you can pick up a paper, you'll see several, but on any given day, you'll see an article or a story about hate crimes or somebody that's been affected by this. And so today, what we're going to talk about is actually what that is. What is a hate crime? How does it show up in the communities that we see represented here? And what can be done about it? Like, what are our next steps? What can we do as we move forward? And so to share their knowledge with us is our distinguished panel of community leaders. And at this moment, I'll just allow them to go down and introduce themselves and say a few words. Start with Arsala, can you start right here? With the mic, I think your mic is right.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
Buenos días. Good morning, everyone. Arcela Núñez Álvarez. I'm here representing Universidad Popular, the People's University. I'm part of a team of community leaders and community educators that works every day to promote education and power building in our community. We work across the North County region and in solidarity with organizations across the county, in Southern California, really with anyone whose mission is to promote human rights, human dignity for everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I see that my mom has joined. Mom, buenos días. And my mom Eva, my sister Maria Nunez, Councilmember Maria Nunez from San Marcos. Thank you for being here. My daughter Flor Alvarez, also with Pillars of the Community. So thank you for being here, all of you.
Good morning. I'm Charlene Seidel. I am really, really honored to be here. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Leishtag Foundation, but I also want to say, to the point of this discussion, I'm also the granddaughter of two grandfathers who were the sole survivors of their families. Everybody else was killed in the Holocaust, along with 6 million other Jews and many, many other oppressed peoples, which was sort of the ultimate manifestation of where hate can get us. The Leishtag Foundation is based in North County, San Diego, and in Jerusalem. We build resilient civil society. We have a special interest in food justice, in reversing the link between poverty and obesity, in ensuring healthy access to food, fresh food for all, in issues regarding immigrants and refugees, because we were once refugees many, many times over as Jews. And we work to build leadership, develop strong leadership that will take this community and this world forward from us so we can leave them a few less problems and a few more opportunities. So thank you.
Okay, I'll continue. My name is Yusef Miller. I'm with the San Diego County Anti-Hate Crimes Coalition, as well as the Executive Director of the North County Equity and Justice Coalition and the Executive Director of Activist San Diego. And I'm also a member of the North County chapter of the NAACP. This issue, as you can see from these different organizations that are represented here and the ones that I represent as well, that this issue is serious and it is throughout the county, whether it's anti-Black, whether it's anti-Asian, whether it's anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish, everybody, the spectrum is attached to this county. So don't think because we're in a place of fun and sun that this doesn't happen here. You all know sometimes we're preaching to the choir in these type of settings. You all know that it happens here. So I just want to say that I'm glad and honored to be here. I want to thank you for showing up to hear more from us, and I'll pass it now.
Thank you, Max Disposti, EMS pronouns. I'm the founder, executive director of the North County LGBTQ Resource Center. We're here for a lot of reasons, because the intersectionality that you see here in this panel is also representing our own community, the LGBTQ community, the queer community. We're here because, like Yusef said, hate crimes affects anyone and usually has the same roots. We'll see later how that matures in our community, and also we're here because we want to bring this inwards conversation to the outward world and make people aware of what can be done and how we can work together to overcome hate. So honored to be here, looking forward for the conversation today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Yusef and Max, for honoring Mustafa. I appreciate that. And yeah, if he was here, he'd be here front and center, asking questions, directing me what to say, as usual, and directing others as well. Not just me. So any given day, I wear lots of hats, like most people here. One of my favorite hats is that I am Max's Indian sister. So I wear that with great pride. But my name is Tazeen Nizam. I currently serve as the executive director of the Office of CARE, which is, thank you. Thanks, Jen. I serve as the executive director of the San Diego Office of CARE, which is Council of American Islamic Relations. We are a nationwide organization which fights for civil rights for Muslim community members and our larger immigrant community. We have 30 offices across the nation, 4 in California, and I get the privilege of being in the San Diego office. We get a lot of calls throughout the year for a lot of hate crimes, for hate incidences. So my office and I are constantly at the forefront of the work that our amazing panel does over here. Personally, myself, I've lived in North County for about 20 years. I've lived in San Diego for 31 years, the different parts of the county. By education, I am a geek, I'm an accountant, but by privilege, I happen to be at the forefront of this work, and I don't take that lightly. That's a responsibility, and that's a privilege and an honor that I want to continue doing this work. And as you heard about my husband, he's always on the ground, and he was not just on the ground, he was a social media warrior as well, which I tremendously lack that expertise. So if you've not known him personally, I'm sure you've come across him on his social media rants. And he was, front and center. He was always standing for the right, no matter how he showed up, and the most important thing for him was to stand with communities that did not have a voice. And I can only aspire to be as great of a warrior as him, and I can continue his work and then pass on these values to our daughter, and hope that the work continues, the passion continues, and the love, the tremendous love that he had for the community continues with our work. Thank you.
My name is Satia Austin. I am the president of the North San Diego County NAACP. We are 113 years old, fighting civil rights on every forefront.
Yeah.
To the other organizations I represent, I want to say that because hate doesn't just end violent crimes. Hate is like lack of resources. So I do represent Operation Hope North County, as well as Alliance for Solution to Change, as well as the Racial Justice Coalition. I'm forgetting some, right? But the point of it is, again, we just can't stop with the hate crimes. I mean, because we allow, I'm saying this loosely, we allow this to happen by us not using our voices, by us not voting, by us not being in these spaces. And so we have to be able to create the narrative, like spaces like this, to be able to speak up and say, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. I know we had a lot of people show up when George Floyd was murdered. But now here it is, years later, what are we doing now for that cause? We have to continue these spaces and these conversations, because we have to turn the marching into policy. We have to turn the policy into action. And we have to be able to unite our communities, because again, when it affects one person, it affects everyone. In whatever facet it does, but it absolutely does, especially our children. So I do also represent the North County Promise. We have to create spaces for them in education. We have to be able to teach them that it's okay to be different and not look like somebody, to not appreciate where they come from. And so I think that's the most thing I want to be here for, because I want to educate them. I don't want my children to see a world that we're seeing right now. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brett Kalina. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am a supervisory special agent with the San Diego FBI. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I've been in the FBI about 20 years, going on my 20th year. And through that time, I've done a lot of different work. But one of the things I want to let you guys know today, that I've been a member of we call it Bureau Equality, which is the queer organization, the advisory group within the FBI for LGBT plus employees. And I've also served as in liaison with the San Diego FBI and amongst the other law enforcement organizations in the county who have stepped up and recruited other liaisons to create a group of multiple organizations within San Diego County law enforcement that are liaisons that represent the queer community. And just to let you know, I'm here today to talk to you about the specifics of hate crimes, what it means, the elements of those crimes, and how they differ amongst the federal jurisdictions, the state jurisdictions, and even the local and county jurisdictions. They all vary slightly, and so that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you. So as we start our conversation today, I thought it would be a good idea to kind of lay the foundation and define hate first. You know, what we kind of need to know what hate is before we know what a hate crime is, right? So So what is this thing that we're standing united against? What is this thing that we're trying to stop? This hate. So if we take a look at, in the dictionary, in the Webster's Merriam Dictionary, hate is defined as an intense hostility or aversion, usually deriving from fear, anger, or a sense of injury. To feel extreme enmity toward, to regard with active hostility. And so how many of us, though, can say that we've hated something, like kind of loosely, right? Like, I hate pineapples on pizza. I hate driving downtown, or I hate when my partner leaves the toilet seat up, anything like that, So, but of course, in that sense, hate is, it's kind of innocuous, right? It's kind of innocuous, but because it's not often you hear of somebody going down to the Domino's and shooting it up because there's pineapples on the pizza. So what happens when this hate escalates, when it includes that fear and that anger? Like, I hate him, or I hate her, or I hate those people. So in this heightened state, in the state of intense hostility or extreme enmity, hate can cause people to turn to violence. That's why we're here now. And so just as clearly as there's a difference between hating a certain type of pizza or hating a certain group of people, there's a difference between a hate crime, a hate incident, and hate speech. And so to help us understand that, I know Brett kind of alluded to it, but I think we're gonna open it up. I think I'm gonna call on Yusuf to start us off with that. So please share some information about that, those differences for us, please.
Okay, the one thing I like to include in the definition of hate is also learned hate, enculturated hate. Enculturated hate being that this country, this nation was formed with hate. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to evacuate that hate out of our country's fabric. So that part is also a part of hate. It is learned, and we know it can be unlearned. And that's what we're here to do, to make sure that people identify and understand their hate and unlearn it, retreat from it. We have people, I was asked one time, because I'm Muslim, I've been Muslim since birth, and I'm African American. So they asked me, and I'll just add this, that I'm African American since the slave trade. My family has been here since the slave trade, so I didn't immigrate, nothing wrong with that. But some people ask me, so where did your family come from? Since I'm Muslim. But Islam has been here since the slave trade. And anyway, I'm Muslim, African American. So I was asked, what is harder, being black or being Muslim in this nation? And I told them, being Muslim gets me insulted kind of regularly, but being black can get me killed in certain areas. So that's how I define the difference. And both of those expressions receive a lot of hate. And this hate needs to be understood in a tactile way, the way we interact with people. And I don't want to steal Brett's thunder, because I know Brett is going to give us some official definitions as well. But when that hate, if you just have that hate within you and you don't act upon it, it's just hate. Having hate is not illegal. If having hate is illegal, we'd be a lot of us would be arrested, But hate is not illegal. But when that bias turns into an action, then you cause an incident. And people need to understand this. Having hate and a hate crime and a hate incident, they're all very different. Some can get you in trouble and some will not. So if I have this hate in my heart and I have an incident where I just speak out, hate speech, still, hate speech will not typically get you locked up. In the court of public opinion, though, you will get slammed in the court of a public opinion. You will lose your job. You will get kicked out of societies. You will get removed from clubs that you belong to, and it can affect your life. But no one's going to come and put handcuffs on a person who calls me the N-word. That will just spread through social media, and it'll affect them in the court of public opinion. But once that seed festers and you cause harm to a person, which is a crime, harm to a person, then it's motivated by this bias, it is a hate crime. So I'm just giving you the basic common language on this. And that hate crime needs to be understood from a hate incident, because I have a friend, a wonderful friend, who doesn't know the difference. They think if something happens to a person of color, because they're a person of color, it is a hate crime. This is not true. If it is motivated by that bias, it becomes a hate incident or a hate crime. Not because I as an African American, thank you. 1 second, please.
I should have opened it.
And that he didn't open it for me is not a hate crime. So if I as an African American get in a fight with someone who is not an African American, that doesn't make it a hate incident just because we're of different races. If that fight was not motivated by a bias, maybe that person took my wallet, that person happens to be white, and they took my wallet and I happened to give them a black eye. This doesn't mean it was a racial incident. He tried to rob me, and I corrected that the way I knew how, and we're both gonna get in trouble. So I just wanted to give a basic layman's understanding. A person that does something to a person of a different ethnicity or a different color does not make it a crime unless it's motivated by a bias and a deep hatred of that person or that people. So I just want to make that clear. And now I'll pass the mic. So.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
Yusuf.
you.
Yeah, Brett, would you care to elaborate on that for us?
Sure. I mean, I don't know why I'm here. So I do want to expound on that a little bit, just so we truly understand the legal definitions between hate speech, hate crimes at the local level and the state level, and then hate crimes at the federal level. If someone incites through language violent acts as a result of that violent language, that can be what's called hate speech and inciting violence based on that hate speech. Those are very difficult cases. You do not hear about them very often, but I do know that the city attorney is in constant discussions with the Hate Crimes Coalition and with various organizations to discuss that so that they know that that's a possibility. I'll give you an instance when we talk about that is maybe there's an event for the LGBT community, the LGBT Pride Parade. And there's a group of individuals that decide to protest not in the allowed protest areas, but they go into the crowd and they say things that they know are going to incite someone to be violent. There is potential there for the local police to arrest those individuals for hate speech. Again, very limited. Now the state crime, as my esteemed colleague here discussed, is talking about hate crimes, and what the state allows is that there can be an additional penalty or fine if it's done in furtherance of or based on real or perceived biases. So that means that if someone takes action, whether it's a battery, whether it's an assault, whether it is some type of violent act, and it's done in furtherance based upon that hate or perceived hate. So I am not Jewish, but if I was walking down the street and someone perceived me to be Jewish and took a violent act against me, even though I'm not Jewish, that individual could still be charged with a hate crime, even though they're not doing, I'm not affected in the way that that person intended. So that's very important. That can be specifically for individuals that their minority status is not known, it's not visible. People with disabilities, people that are issues with whether they're trans or non-binary, and so gender is an issue, LGBT people. So it's important there to notice the distinction in the California law is that it's still pretty wide open in that any of the laws that are out there on the books can be, and that includes misdemeanors. So a misdemeanor in California can still get an additional penalty for a hate crime. Now, I'm with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I work federal crimes. I am not an expert on state law and state, and city laws, so I just want to put that out there. I'm just trying to give you some basics on that. Now, when it comes to federal crimes, there's the National Federal Hate Crimes Code of Regulations that's now about 25 years that's been around. That is the same where it's a perceived or real bias against an individual, but in that case, in the federal law, it has to generally be an act of violence against the person. It's not going to be the same if it's against property, whereas under the California law, the state law, you might be able to have a situation in which property is affected. Somebody writes, a bad word on your garage door, okay? That's against the property. That can be a hate crime. That is not going to be a federal hate crime. Unless it's a religious affiliation, it's a whole nother, it's called the FACE Act, which is completely separate from the James Byrd and Matthew Shepard law. So under the federal law, it's a little bit more difficult to have the hate crimes because it's not as expansive as you get with some of the state laws. However, one of the reasons, and we've got an expert here from the U.S. Attorney's Office who really knows this, the penalties under federal law are generally much higher if you can get a federal violation versus a state violation. Hopefully that's a pretty good lay of the basic laws.
It is, yes, thank you. Satya, did you have a?
So I just want to clarify, I want a statement, the other one you can clarify. Right now, we're having several cases that we're dealing with in the school systems.
Yeah.
And it does include writings, it does include intimidation in the classroom. It includes where now some of these students do not want to go back to school, which is their right to have an education. So if it's not on the books to make that a hate crime, now that we're taking some liberties away from these students, there needs to be. So I guess I'm asking, are we doing something about that, or is that kind of the classification of a hate crime? Because it's happening far too often. I could tell you all that in North County cities alone, there are at least 4 different schools that are experiencing this, and we have to be able to do something.
Yes.
Well, as an agent in the FBI, that is generally not going to fall within federal jurisdiction. However, I think that's where you need to have that good relationship with your local law enforcement, school resource officers, those types of individuals who can report these instances. Now, I haven't talked about this. Yet.
Now we'll get another.
I understand that, and I want to talk a little bit about reporting. I know we're going to try to get into reporting, but one of the things that we've seen is that there's this increase in the numbers of hate crimes that are reported. Does that mean that there hasn't been an actual increase in the hate crimes over the last couple of years? Potentially. I think there's statistics out there that may show that, but one of the things that has gotten better over the last couple of years is the reporting. The reporting has got better. People have to be able to report these things for 2 reasons. One is to hold that individual or that group of individuals accountable. We're never going to be able to hold them accountable if we cannot report that to our local authorities or our federal authorities. And number 2 is that even if there's an incident that may not rise to a hate crime, whether it's state or federal, it's still extremely important to report those incidents to your law enforcement. Well, again, whether it's state or federal. And the reason for that is hate crimes, whether it's perceived or real biases, are mens rea, meaning what's going on up here? What is going on in their mind while they're committing this act? Right? That can be very difficult to prove sometimes. It may be easy if they use a bad word or a derogatory word, but what if they don't? Are prosecutors going to be a little skeptical filing a hate crime if they do not have that? But what if that person that said that at a school and went to that police and said, you know, this happened at school, and they said this word to this individual that proved that bias existed, then that prosecutor is going to be way more likely to use all that evidence, their social media, their other incidents that they bring forward, even if they weren't charged as a hate crime before, they then can be used in that one time when they do get charged for it. So it's really important, even if you are skeptical of law enforcement, and I understand that, I do. I'm not here to defend and say that we're perfect. I know that.
No. We know that.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
I wanted to pose a question actually for folks who are within the community who do this work as well, and knowing that reporting to police is one way in which folks can report hate crimes or hate incidences. For you all on the ground, sometimes a lot of the work that you do is trust building with the community, and it's sometimes could be difficult for individuals to feel safe, to come in and do that. Maybe in your experience, in your work and every day, what does that look like? And then how then do you work to support individuals who are experiencing hate incidences particularly? Because there are ways in which folks can report hate incidences, and Angela will share with that, but I know that you are on the ground doing some of this work. So I'm looking at the ladies who are part of the organization. I know CARE and Tasteen does a lot of that work on the ground, and I know that you have worked with some organizations currently in addressing and thinking through some of that work. So maybe we'll start with Tasteen if that's okay. Sorry, Tess.
Sure. So, very good point, and I didn't want to blast Brett while he was speaking.
Turn it up, yeah.
But I patiently waited, as my Catholic school education taught me. So, when you said establishing relations with local law enforcement, and I could see Max's eyebrow all the way up to his forehead. We do that on a daily basis, right? We are about collaborative work. That's why we're here, because we're not just collaborating amongst ourselves, but entire communities and social networks and systemic systems that are put in place, whether it's law enforcement or direct service providers, all those agencies. We definitely are a part of an integral system that is working on this every day, every single one of us, and so many that are not here. So that being said, my big concern with, let's say I had a hate incident against me, and depending on my past experiences, I am scared to go to the FBI, because the last few times FBI showed up at my door, and even with me telling them that yes, I have an attorney, do not contact me, or yes, I have an attorney, do not show up at my workspace or my school or my child's school, continuously that happened. So I have a difficult time convincing my community members to go complain to the FBI. Okay, now let's talk about local law enforcement. Local law enforcement, ouch.
This is how loud I am, see?
No, you're not. No, sometimes maybe we have to turn it off.
She turned it off.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with local law enforcement, because there's such a distinction between reporting a hate incident versus a hate crime, so many of the reports are not, until recently, were not even logged anywhere. I mean, with work, we have gotten the district attorney's office, the city attorney's office to create these spaces where people are able to report hate incidences. In the past, if it did not mount to a level of a hate crime, these things were not even noticed. or noted or codified somewhere. And because now we're able to gather this data, we're able to show the multiple times the same individual is able to show up everywhere and create these nuisances. And hopefully, with the repeated offenses, this person will do something, or at least law enforcement will notice that this person is a troublemaker and something will be said and done. So me going to my community members and convincing them continuously is, please report, can only go so far if they're not receiving the support with institutions like law enforcement, FBI, or the Department of Homeland Security. Right? The Department of Homeland Security has already got such a microscope on the Muslim community, I don't have to worry about that. We've got CVE, CP3, so many programs that they're continuously monitoring our mosque, our schools, our people. Like my community members show up and they're being sent they get picked up. They go to a hearing and they've got these pictures of these people going in and out of the mosque, going in and out of his child's school, going in and out of her family members' homes, because we are being continually surveilled. So I'm not even going to bring that up with deep intensity because I will go off on a rant. Let's keep that away. Let's talk about hate incidences and hate crimes, which all of us are here to talk about. So me being able to go tell my community, Satya being able to tell that student that yes, report, is only going to go so far till they stop hitting a dead wall. And their reporting is being met with some kind of action, some kind of reciprocity, some kind of policies and practices put in place where it encourages people to report.
Thank you, Tessie.
I don't know who's gonna follow that.
Exactly who else wants to go next and maybe kind of share again how some different microaggressions show up in your specific community. Marcella, you want to start?
Thank you for that. It is hard to follow, but I think there are a lot of similarities with Mexican, Chicano, Latinx, immigrant, indigenous communities here, particularly in North County. It is really complicated when the question is just about reporting, because it really necessitates a much bigger conversation to understand why our community is so hesitant to report. Let me just briefly share a case that is actually really important in our community. In 1995, there was a case here in North County. This is a case of a group of high school students from Rancho Peñasquitos who after school actually went out to hunt Mexican farm workers. They got in their truck, they drove out into the encampments where many of the farm workers lived. One of the farm workers was actually at the camp at that time. He was so severely beaten that they practically dragged him and left him unconscious. They thought he was dead. They got in their cars and left. This case ended up coming to light because it was reported at the hospital. Not because the farm workers knew that this was an egregious crime, period. But because really they ended up taking this elderly 65-year-old farm worker to the nearby hospital. Many farm workers and people in our community, like we've come to understand that we're really looking at a very systemic problem that we have in relation to law enforcement, in the way that laws really privilege some groups while oppressing other groups. We've come to understand that reporting a case really means that nothing is done for most of our community most of the time. There are so few cases that really get the justice that is deserved. And that is because it's intrinsic in the law. Like we have, it doesn't mean that it was really written to benefit our communities. And I think that cases that are so egregious that end up with a law being written, it's really not addressing the systemic problem that we have. So I wanted to share this case because it's one that even after it went through prosecution here in San Diego County, there was no crime found. The youth that were actually involved ended up getting probably 5 months, probation. These are all affluent white kids, right, that felt that privilege, were able to navigate the legal system and pretty much got off. The migrants, on the other hand, especially the elderly man, ended up moving back to Mexico. He actually didn't even wait for the case to be resolved. He left. Many other folks are afraid to call because of the collusion with immigration, with Homeland Security, with ICE, with Border Patrol, that continues to be prevalent today. So when we report from our community, it really means that sometimes that report could have even more detrimental impacts on our community and our family than addressing that particular incident. So it's a very insidious kind of system that just hasn't worked for us. And as someone who is an abolitionist, again, from another perspective, like focusing on the criminalization of hate is just one aspect of it, right? Like our focus is on liberating brothers and sisters from prison and from the system that has been so devastating for Black and brown and communities of color. I don't want to feed into it, so I think there are other solutions that we really need to focus on that address the systemic and the individual expressions of hate in our community. That's why as an educator, our team feels empowered that we are able to teach about our history, about these instances. We teach out in the community Chicana studies, where we're able to talk about us, who we are, our history, and really begin to shift to an approach of empowerment for our community. But for us, just the reporting question alone, it's really complicated.
Yeah, Dr. would you care to share as well?
I won't share about the reporting issue, it's not my area.
Sure. Or we'll just, if you have some, just how hate or how microaggressions might show up in your community, like in your churches or in your businesses, and how those escalate and lead to a hate crime.
Well, if Yusuf are you going to talk about reporting?
I was going to talk about mostly reporting.
Okay, so go ahead.
Okay, back to reporting, because reporting is so serious, right? It is a broken bridge when it comes from the incident to correction of those incidents. And it all stems from a comfortability and a feeling of resolve that comes from reporting, which we don't have. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the African American community. It doesn't exist in the Muslim community. It doesn't exist in the Latinx community. At very small percentages, it may exist in our indigenous community. And when I say indigenous, I want to just make sure that people understand when I say indigenous, I mean indigenous of North, Central, and South America. All of them are indigenous, to include our Latinx brothers and sisters. So when you do a hate crime against someone who is Latinx, you're actually doing a hate crime against someone who is indigenous to this land. And I want to give honor to our indigenous brothers and sisters. So when it comes to reporting, we know, for example, again, I must pick on the FBI because we have a history of a broken relationship, starting from and before the COINTELPRO counterintelligence program that monitored Black communities and Latinx communities, pit these communities against one another for violence, and people have lost their lives from this violence from the COINTELPRO. We push back from reporting to or including of the FBI in our communities and the solutions to our communities. As a matter of fact, I just want to bring this out, before even coming to this forum here, because it was such a big emblem of the FBI, myself and Tazeen, we get calls. Don't go to that. They're just monitoring our community. You know, they just want to find out how to watch the mosque better. Tazeen and I, as Muslims. And I'm sure Satya and I get questions about, are you going to bring up COINTELPRO? Are you going to bring up how they monitored X and how they monitored King and how they monitored the Black Panther Party of self-defense, how they monitored and set Black people against one another? We get that question. And then lastly, coming off of the FBI, here locally in San Diego County, when an investigation was done on law enforcement, it found that the Sheriff's Department arrested and stopped Black and brown people at a higher rate than our white counterparts. And we're expected to report to the Sheriff's Department in certain places in the county. We've also found in an independent investigation of the police department that they arrest and stop Black and brown people at a higher rate than our white counterparts. And here's something that's interesting from the reports. There have been many reports. There's actually been 3 reports talking about the thing we've been complaining about for decades. There's been recent reports. But here's something that's interesting for you to think about. When they investigated the stop data, driving in the car and law enforcement pulling you over, that in the daytime, Black and brown was stopped at a higher percentage. At nighttime, it balanced out.
They can't see your black.
I didn't even have to tell you, right? So this is instructive on what's going on in the community. So when it comes to reporting to law enforcement, you find underreporting in Black and brown communities, indigenous communities, in our LGBTQ communities, and I'll let Max and others go into that part. So we find underreporting due to that harm that we've received from law enforcement, and we consider that hate incidents. We consider those also hate crimes, and some of them have risen to the level of hate crimes coming from the people we report to. And to Satya's point, then I'll close, sorry. To Satya's point, in the school system, we've been working with the school systems in a circle, reporting in a circle, and coming out with kids will be kids. Yeah. We come out with kids will be kids. And that is not, I'm not for incarcerating children unless they do an incident that rises to an egregious, hurtful event. But we need more than kids will be kids. I'm going to suspend you for a week, in school suspension or something like that. We need more of a penalty that rises to, I will never do this, and my parents will not allow me or instruct me to do this ever again. So, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. Wow, where do I start? Because then, I know Brett knows that where I stand already when it comes to policing and law enforcement. At the center, we do a lot of that work. We do work with people that are survivor of hate crime, and then I hope we can spend some time about how not just the reporting is not enough, but also who's supporting the people that are surviving a hate crime. Because the reality is the system we have in place, if you are a survivor of hate crime, the trauma is so deep, physical, emotional, you can't go to work, you can't pay your bills, you're afraid to travel in public transportation. So nobody talks about the consequences, in some cases last years, not just a few weeks. Mm-hmm. And there is not a system in place, including the DA, that I know that they made themselves the paladin of hate crime, and even this week alone, right? We're trying to, and trust me, full disclosure, in organizing this, trust me, we had those conversations. Should we have the FBI here? I trust this guy over here because I can tell him how it is, but I don't trust the institution, the FBI. You see, 2 different things. I can respect individuals without dehumanizing them, but I do not trust the institution, FBI or law enforcement or DA and so forth. I don't think they are reformable. I'm gonna say that I do not think they are reformable. But how can we reduce the impact in our own communities when something like that happened, because definitely you had this infrastructure that's racist, that was created to divide people, institutionalized violence that has affected us throughout generations. For my queer community, in addition to all of that, there is also the gender violence and the policing of our body, and the fact that tomorrow we have Trans Day of Remembrance, where 67 trans women of color are being killed just in North America for being trans, and 500 rest of the world that we know of, because many are not even reported as crimes. So so there is this element. So as an LGBT center, we open this question: how do we support people on the ground, because they need to be supported, but how do we also not just provide food and resources and mental health, which we do, but how we break the chain of the dynamics of, I think reporting is important. Do I believe that that's going to resolve the issues? Not so much. It brings that sense of relief for individual, and the majority of part doesn't even bring justice. Last example, I know I was training with Brett. We supported an individual. I'm not going to share names for privacy. Daylight stopped in Oceanside for being gay. The whole conversation, as we were saying before, was it really a hate crime? Was the person, as it was stabbing, saying, "I stabbed you because of"? So imagine, this is the level of scrutiny that also the survival and the victim has to go through. So after we pass all of that, we prove it, it goes to the DA, and then we know what happened, and the police doesn't report it correctly, so you have to fight with the police, and then you go back to the DA. 5 years for attempted murder in a daylight. There's gonna end up to be a 15-month sentence. This is just came out. So that's one of the issues. So I think, again, the resolution is now in reporting. It is part of one of the possibility, but it's not the resolution, it's not the justice. At the same time, I think that we need to look at how to support our brothers and sisters and non-binary folks, how to survive the hate crime. Nobody talks about that. For years and years, rightfully so, when we are sexually assaulted, there is, and not even always, definitely not within the indigenous community, they are still left out even from the conversation when it comes to that, but there is a system in place where people are supported for months to go. When it comes to a hate crime that's racially motivated or gender motivated or LGBT motivated, there is really no support. The DA comes there, it gives you 2 checks, if you're lucky, after months and months of waiting. This person in particular couldn't survive for months. It was ending up on the streets because they couldn't work physically, they couldn't go to work. And the family even disassociated that person because they, oh, you're overreacting, because the harm was emotional also, not just physical. People don't even recognize the emotional harm. So there's a lot of conversation to be had about how do we also support people in the journey of recovery, not just when the act happens. So to me, I think the conversation around, I conclude there, law enforcement and institutions of oppressions needs to be had, and also as everybody has, because all of us, we work together. I was sharing with Tazim months ago, I say, you know, it's interesting. We all pretty much go and show up in spaces and we do training. We do training to the police. Sometimes people say, why do you do training to the police, right? And we say, folks, don't underestimate us. We don't do training to the police because we think the training is gonna change the institutions of oppression. We do training to the police because we try to reduce the impact, because our people on the streets now know that they know us, so when things happen, they can come to us and let us know that that agent, that person, that law enforcement, that sheriff department has done that against us. It creates more community collaborations among us, not so much with the powers that we are going to train for. So it's a big conversation that needs to be had, because sometimes the people who are talking about hate crimes are the people perpetrating the hate crimes, right? And I think each one of our community can talk for hours about the microaggressions that leads or could lead to hate crimes. Is the everyday racism in the schools, like Cecilia was saying. For us, it means like having council members in our own cities, or city board members that run for school districts, that they're openly say that being LGBT, it means grooming, it means, perpetrating crimes. And there are laws in the rest of the country actually are pursuing our kids just for being trans right now in America. And these people are really fleeing states like Texas and Florida to come here, but they still don't trust the police because they've seen what they look like in those spaces, and who they are, and what kind of laws are protecting when it comes to queer folks and BIPOC people. So that's it. I'll pass it to you.
I think you passed over Charlene. I wouldn't.
Right, we totally skipped
You
Charlene.
can't skip my sister over, brothers.
Yeah, we'll take some of the heat off Brett and the institutions and all that.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch gears a little.
Yeah.
This is a really important though and powerful discussion, and just, I don't want to skip over the import of the discussion. Switching to how hate is showing up and has shown up for a long time, but is particularly present now for the Jewish community. I will just start by saying that last night I was at dinner with friends. The friends had little kids, and we all started talking about where our passports were. Did their children have passports? Because you know what? Many, many generations of my family had to flee from countries that they thought were accepting of them, that they thought that they were settled in, that they thought were successful in. My own great-grandfather, I referred to his son, my grandfather, earlier. He was a proud soldier in the German army in World War I. He thought that, nothing is going to happen. Here, it's just talk. It's just talk, right? And my great-grandmother, thank goodness, didn't think it was talk. And so in 1938, after Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, which was when basically the systems were really set onto the Jewish community in Germany, she left with her 2 sons by herself. She left her husband. She said, this proud German soldier, Jewish German soldier, she said, I'm either coming with you or going with you or without you. And they went to South Africa. That was the only place that would take them at the time. And that was the last time that my grandfather saw his great-grandfather, because even with all of his medals, he was burnt in Auschwitz like everybody else. And so I want to just say that I'm really grateful for conversations that we're having today that include many, many forms of hate, some that may be apparent and some that may not be so apparent. And the conversation that we were having last night about passports and children, on the one hand, we're Jewish, we joke around a lot, like there's all kinds of jokes going around, but also, like, I have a joke with my friends of like, who would be the first to die I think I would be. I wouldn't even get through a day in that ghetto because I get so cold I'm freezing here in this library, and I would be shot just on sight. But you know what? There's truth to those jokes. Like, we all have coping mechanisms. This is a really, really scary time. Incident-wise, there was a 34% increase in 2021 over 2020, according to the groups that track it, in anti-Semitic incidents. It's the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, they track anti-Semitic incidents, and it's the highest number of incidents, not reported incidents necessarily, but actual incidents that have, that there's been since anti-Semitic incidents started to be reported in 1977. I think the midterms brought out a lot for our Jewish community. You saw it, frankly, across the spectrum. There were references, everything from, this is a Christian country, in a race that was between a Jew and a Christian, but very, very pointedly, to holding all Jews responsible maybe for the actions of Israel, which I know is a sensitive topic, but I want to say, and I don't think that all expressions of disagreement, I have plenty myself, with Israel is anti-Semitic, but there are certain ways like collective responsibility that are anti-Semitic, and we saw a lot of that across the board. Anti-Semitism is ultimately a conspiracy theory. It's the ultimate conspiracy theory. It's the conspiracy theory that Jews run the world, that Jews have more money, have more power, have more decision-making, authority and ability than the rest of them, that everybody else is sort of a puppet in the hands of the puppeteer, the Jews. We know that right here in Poway,
there was a synagogue shooting not too long ago, a few years ago, and there were many reams of reasons that the killer put forth, and one of them was that Jews support immigrants. They show up like HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which started in its roots helping Jewish refugees and now helps refugees and immigrants from all over. This is just a way that the Jew is setting, the minority against us, and they are in control. We're seeing that really across the board. And when there are threats to democracy, we know that anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine, and that it gets swept up. I don't want to get too political about it, but unfortunately our former president really made it okay to hate in a lot of forms, but certainly in some of his "I'm just joking" threats or tropes, he made it okay to, "Oh, you're being too sensitive." Some of the important information that was shared is also really traumatic for me as a Jew, as the granddaughter, to hear some of these conspiracy jokes or theories or innuendo about Jewish control. That kind of sets my back on edge because I know it can be a slippery slope. In terms of microaggressions, there are so many macroaggressions out there, but I will just share like two from the last 2 weeks. Yesterday, I was in the airport with my little nephew, who's an Orthodox Jew, so he has the skull cap and usually I don't necessarily look Jewish, right? Whatever that means, and there are all kinds of Jews who look all kinds of ways, but we were more visible. And I don't think I'm a particularly pushy person, but we were standing in line. Maybe we had cut in the line accidentally, and somebody said very loudly, "Look, they're always trying to take over. They're always pushing their way in for when they're not wanted." Now, my nephew kind of looked at me. He's 7. I didn't want to say anything, but that's really obviously something that is, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. I didn't say anything. I don't think it would have happened if it would have just been me and I would have accidentally bumped in line. That's one example, just of something that happened the last couple days. Another interesting, just sort of anecdote, because unlike a lot of these brave and wonderful people who I admire on the panel, this isn't necessarily my day job. Although we really show up in support, I think, of many different kinds of hate, including anti-Semitism. But I want to share more anecdotally. One of my best friends, who Max knows well, Hanin, she's an Arab citizen of Israel, a Palestinian citizen of Israel, and she happens to be a professor now a visiting professor at San Diego State University. 2 people in the department have approached her. Actually, she came up to me a few weeks ago and she said, "Charlene, is there some kind of thing that Jews control the world or Jews are rich or something?" And I said, "Yeah, why do you ask?" Well, 2 people, she had never heard this, by the way, which is a whole nother conversation. 2 people had approached her from her department, from her university department with PhDs to say, "Oh, you work kind of for a Jewish organization. Watch out, they control everything and you just need to be careful. They have a lot of power." Now, those people have obviously never been to a Jewish committee meeting or task force meeting. They would know that we don't get decisions made very easily. So we certainly couldn't be a cabal trying to control the world. That's the great irony of one of the oldest myths. But it means that when conspiracy theories are more present, as we know that they are, that when, as I said before, there are threats to democracy, that when people are feeling senses of loss and of fear and of great displacement in our society, the Jews generally, if we look over time, are the next step. And so I think that we all need to show up for each other. I think it's important, very much important, to be educated. Unfortunately, there was a recent survey of high school students in the United States. 40% had never heard of Auschwitz. 40%? Really? And we're not even talking 100 years ago. We're talking about one of the greatest humanitarian disasters, and people being gassed to death. 6 million people, 12 million, 6 million Jews, 6 million other people, and I don't want to denigrate other people, but there were 6 million Jews that were gassed to death, including my own, and 40% of our high school students in this educated and privileged country don't even know what the largest and what I would have thought the most well-known death camp and murder camp is. This is not good enough in this country. And these are some of the ways that it was very natural for my friends and I last night to be having that conversation about our passports. I'm not a histrionic person, but I'm feeling a lot of fear myself right now. And so I thank all of you, and I thank the LGBT Center for wanting to sort of share about our experiences, because I recently read a book called The Oppermans. I recommend it. It was actually first printed in 1933 by a Jewish author who ended up being killed. It was very brave of him. And it was about a conversation in a family over a few months about, in Germany, this is in 1933, by the way, is it time to leave? Should we leave? Is this just, what do you think? Is this just all kind of talk? And the disagreement in the family. It's a novella. And I don't think it only applies to the Jewish community. I would suspect that everybody on this panel and beyond has had these kinds of conversations in their own communities. For Jews during World War II, there was nowhere to go. This country unfortunately had quotas and didn't take them. My grandparents were lucky to find a place, but many weren't as lucky. And we've got to work to educate and to make sure that we're aware of the ways that us as minority groups are all pitted against each other, to be sure that we don't have to struggle, because right now there's very few places that we could go. And so that's why I'm so committed to this work and so committed to the work of colleagues here, and I thank you very much for listening.
I want to continue with the anti-Semitism, and I want to thank you for acknowledging that standing up for the Palestinian struggle does not equate to necessarily anti-Semitism. So I want to thank you for acknowledging that. But here in North County, where we've had swastikas spray painted on houses in Poway, here in North County, where we had pictures of Hitler put up just recently, put up in a school along with great leaders. Martin Luther King and Gandhi, we have a picture of Hitler as a great leader for Germany, and we have these things going on. The N-word spray painted on school walls, and anti-LGBTQ statements on LGBTQ on school walls. That we have a serious problem that we need to stand together, because as she mentioned, the Poway shooting, that person who did that started in the Muslim community. They tried to burn down our mosque in Escondido. They tried to burn our mosque and was unsuccessful. That same person spray painted on the ground a ode or a celebration to the Christchurch murderer, the person who shot up and killed all the people in the mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. And then we as the Muslim community was so hurt that we didn't catch that person when we found that that's the same person who shot up the synagogue. And we can see the intersectionality of this event, that they came to Escondido and tried to burn down the mosque, and there were people sleeping inside. They tried to burn down the mosque at 3 in the morning or something like that, thinking they wouldn't get caught. And our video cameras weren't working at the time. So we were looking for this person. Muslims were on edge, looking for this person to make an ode to the Christchurch massacre. Is he gonna come back and try to do a Christchurch style massacre? He could have, looking at what he did in Poway, which is basically right next door. He could have done that same thing. We were on edge. Did we go to worship? People still went to worship. Attendance was lower. But what would we do? And then we found that person who shot up Christchurch, later, they found on his computer that he lamented, he regretted that the Muslims came out and put out that fire. And he called us epithets, and he, talking about his thing about that. That's how we know that those two things were connected. But religiously speaking, we're family. We're not opposed religiously, even if we have some political disagreements. Now, since I wear two hats, I have a kufi, and my skin, promotes that I am a person of African descent, a beloved and proud person of African descent, I'll go into the microaggressions against African Americans. The microaggressions in schools with the fight against DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, calling it CRT, which has nothing to do with K through 12. But if you are fighting against diversity in school, you're fighting against equity in school and inclusion in school, we're preparing our children to come out to a diverse, equitable, hopefully equitable, and inclusive world. And we're not gonna tell them about diversity. These aggressions, they take and they blame who? They blame the African American, and also they blame our Jewish brothers and sisters for some kind of grooming that we have. So that fight is latent with anti-Black sentiments, as well as the statement against Black Lives Matter. People say Black Lives Matter as if we were only saying Black lives only matter. We're saying Black Lives Matter also. I know people in this group know and understand, but those who may watch this later, we're saying Black Lives Matter also. Those people who want to attack African Americans saying Black Lives Matter only, no, it's not what we said. And we both, the people who are attacking us and those who are promoting it, are both speaking English. We're both speaking English. All they had to do was ask us, what does that mean? Explain to me, talk to me a little more if they didn't know, right? So this is an issue when people try to attack this slogan as if Black people want to get something, want to be elevated above everyone else. But we say if you lift from the bottom, and as everybody probably know this phrase, everybody rises. If you lift by the most affected, the most marginalized, everyone rises as you lift from the bottom. So we get this statement, and then I'll say the last thing. I said I was going to be brief, but the last thing I want to say is that in San Diego County, at max, we're 5% in the entire county. When you break down the counties by north and east and south, then we drop down to 2.5, sometimes to 2%. So it is treated as if we don't matter, but we matter. When we say we don't want to talk about Black history, we don't want to read Black books, because we're only 2%. This is another microaggression attack on Black students to say that they don't matter. In San Diego Academy, San Diego Unified School District, there are no Black teachers. The last Black teacher retired a few months ago. There are no Black teachers in the whole system. But who has control over our hiring practices? So these are the microaggressions that I've experienced along with law enforcement, which we beat up a lot. So I'm not going to go into that anymore. But the microaggressions that we have throughout this entire county here locally.
Thank you.
So I just want to close out the recording. Is it not on? No.
It's good, it's good. I think
If we can hold just one moment, Cynthia, I think we have a question in the audience real fast. Did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, if I can have a few minutes, I would appreciate that, representing Asian community. My name is Brocade Wu, and I'm the president of San Diego Chinese American Organization. And I feel regret that we are Asian community are not included in this conversation.
It's on.
Well, people usually regard Asian American as model citizen and thinking that, oh, we are successful and we have it all made and we didn't receive any discrimination. Well, I would like to educate you about how Asian American has been treated and has to face the challenges throughout the American history. We are the first race that was being excluded from immigration in the late 18th century, late 19th century and early 20th century. And throughout the history, in those early history, many Chinatowns in many cities were burned and people were massacred and expelled, property taken. And this happened not just in West Coast, but East Coast, throughout the American. I can name just quite a few. Of course, New York, San Francisco, LA, Santa Ana, and I personally actually ran into a mural in Monterey Bay that described one of that incident in their own community, how a small village of Chinese resident has been living there for years, and then one day a mysterious fire just happened and burned down the village, and they were forced to leave that area. So, and for talking about after the Civil Rights Act, we have that affirmative action, but Asian community are really the beneficiary of affirmative action. We were actually being denied or discriminated because we, in certain areas, particularly the school admission, that we were overrepresented. But actually, except the school admission, in any other area, Asian community, Asian American are underrepresented. In the media, in the sports area, in the leadership position, Asian Americans are just really glaringly missing, just like in the forum today. And I feel sorry that we are not included. And I can provide more information how Asian Americans have to face every day, even nowadays, to be discriminated, to be denied many of the benefits that we should enjoy as an equal right or diversity. But we are not considered that we are as a marginalized community. Even in the anti-Asian hate nowadays, that people, Asian, are killed on the street, persecuted on the street for no reason at all, just because we are Asian. Well,
that's right.
We like to OCA San Diego are going to host a rally against hate and a lantern parade for inclusion in downtown San Diego in February 4th of next year. And I invite all the marginalized community or non-marginalized community to join us to rally against hate and the lantern parade for inclusion. And I will send out more information to all of you. And let's work together. Don't divide against each other like our enemies would like to see. Right. Let's work together, and it will be better for all of us. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
They said you could sit up there. They want you to sit up there.
Satia has been waiting for patiently.
Right. Yeah. It's just, we got a little
I definitely want to agree, so thank you for saying that. I mean, because, you know, African Americans, we go through a long history of oppression as well as being murdered in the streets, and still today, and in our jail systems and in police custody. And so we have a uncomparison history at the same time that we have a comparative history. But my comment was simply to close out the reporting. Generationally speaking, culturally speaking, African Americans don't report because of assimilation, because they're the fear that they've been weaponized anytime they report, to whereas if somebody that's not African American comes up and say, no, we didn't do that, no, this is what they did, and now the African Americans have been the ones that have been held responsible and been jailed or murdered or whatever it looks like. So we have a bad history right now in place, a bad taste in our mouth about it. So until we tighten up on those reporting laws, until we tighten up on the things, you're going to continue to see that, because there are more people likely than none that are afraid to report. They're afraid to be in those spaces. And we actually just had a conversation yesterday on a call about a parent whose child has been constantly bullied, has been ostracized, has been called the N-word, been treated badly, but she would rather at this point, because she's continually reported, she did what she was supposed to do, but at the end of the day, she just wanted to let her child just graduate, just get off the norm, try to keep his head down, just so they can graduate and then get out of the school and be gone and never want to come back here again. That's a problem. So it's like assimilation is real. You know, again, it's been, like I said, a long history of it. And so the reporting is just not that simple. We can fill out whatever, we could tell everybody in the school district, but when the whole school is against you, when the whole county and the city council are against you, what other recourses do we have? So I thank you for saying that, but we have to tighten up on those rules. So.
Thank you.
We're not taking questions yet, are we?
Yeah.
We were doing it later, I guess, but yeah.
Just want to close it out with something lighthearted, because I know Shia, it got a little heavy. You know, we're going to have difficulty swallowing any snacks after this, so let me just make it lighthearted. So Charlene talked about some microaggressions. So the fun part that I always get is, aren't you hot? I was like, I was hot, I'd know, and I'd take care of it. This is why chiffon and georgette was invented, so I don't have to wear pashmina all the time. The other microaggression that we always hear is Muslim women are oppressed and we're forced to wear the hijab. And so some of you didn't meet my husband, but he'd have told you who wears the pants in our family. Or enter a Lebanese home and they will tell you the women rule. So this is a myth, and this is a microaggression that we always face. But just one more digression is talking about triple-digit hate incidences. Recently, just last week, there was, or 2 weeks ago, there was an incident on San Diego State campus where a female Jewish professor had a picture of a hijabi on her door, and somebody drew a swastika on it. So talk about a woman being under attack, a Jewish woman, and a hijabi woman's picture and a swastika on it. So we're all in this together. We face it together, and we face our own microaggressions, whether it be us being ready with our passports or me being hot all the time. We're in this together.
Thank you. You keep up with it.
Marcella has one more comment, and then after that.
I wanted to say that we do not have the Hindu Americans.
There we go.
We have been facing a lot of discrimination, and it has been going on for decades, and now in the last few years, it has picked up to such scale that it is literally intolerable. So it is something which I think the group here should also include the Hindu Americans, because this is one of the oldest civilization surviving very well. And I think we have a lot to say about what kind of hate crimes we face and our students face in the schools and the universities. It comes down to even the religious festivals that we have to celebrate. Now they are being marginalized, that no, you should not be celebrating these. Who is anybody to tell us that what we should celebrate and not celebrate? And who is anybody to tell us that I should not be wearing the dot on my head, Why should it bother anybody? Just because we are a quieter community, we do not interfere in other people, we are in our own thing about being educated, being successful in our careers. We do not want to hurt. We believe, that's our culture that tells us that the whole world is one family. That's what our culture starts with. Vasudeva Kutumbakam. Vasudeva means the whole world, and Kutumbakam is family. You and I and her and she and him and everybody, whether it is black, white, brown, yellow, whoever, we are all one family. We all have the same blood. We all come from the same creator. Why is there so much difference? So why are the Hindus being marginalized? And there are all these labels put on them. I think we should be part of the group where we can speak up.
Can I just say something? Hey, thank you so much for that. I just want to make sure that for those of you, if you know any of us, you know that was never the intention to leave any group out because it's less visible than others. So I hope that, and we can add and continue to add shares here because everyone belongs to be here, and I just want to share that. And I know that sometimes the microaggression is being, if we have to invite everybody, this is going to be 300 people. We are welcoming these 300 people. It's not about, just few and other. We are looking forward to do more of this with more voices, more experience and perspective. So please stay in touch because this is not just
because like she said, the Chinese are not being represented, the Asians. I feel the Hindu Americans are not being represented at all, so I would definitely get in touch with all of you.
Thank you. Thanks for saying.
Absolutely noted, yeah. Thank you. And again, we'll have, as I mentioned before, like in the beginning, not everyone is here, and absolutely, we'd have 300 chairs, but definitely we will absolutely continue the conversation. And as Sazine was saying, things were kind of getting a little heavy, so we're going to actually take a little bit of a break now, so let everyone kind of stand up, stretch your legs. Please have some refreshments, and we'll come back in about 15 minutes and revisit our conversation here and kind of talk about the next steps and what we can do. Thank you. So let's all open it up to all panelists who wants to take this question, whoever wants to go first. Again, just kind of going back to our Webster's definition about hate and this feeling, how do we do it? How do we start to change this feeling? And what's necessary? What's necessary to mitigate biases and hate? And what are some of the steps do you think that we can take?
Since I had the mic.
Yes.
I think there are a lot of things we can do, including having real conversation like we're having it today, starting from calling the things the way they are with the names that they belong. And in spaces that sometimes, where sometimes that calling out and making people responsible, accountable for it doesn't always happen, right? Not just in politics, in places, institutions, but also in our own community. So one thing I was reflecting before about this amazing diversity, even here in in this room, which is just a small part of the diversity in our own North County. I always think about how do we show up, for me as a queer person, what it means to be queer Muslim, what it means to be queer Jewish at the same time, what it means to be queer and Black or Chinese, and all the diversity that we even shared today, because sometimes, for instance, in our own community, speaking about microaggressions, sometimes there is the fear of every time we call out about queer experiences in environment and spaces of diversity, there is always a challenge because they say, queer people sometimes are less visible than being Black, for instance, which is absolutely true, and there is no comparison. And also, talking about the diversity among ourselves doesn't mean disqualifying other groups in the conversation that think, you're less oppressed than me, so you shouldn't talk, or you're more oppressed than me. So there's sometimes this dynamic in our own community when some of us represent a lot of this identity at the same time. So that's one thing. The second, I talked about what can we do, so having real conversation like these ones. There is a lot about, to my heart, because perhaps in the past years alone, I had to support so many people that were, like many of you here in the panel, that were victim of hate crimes, that it's a tiring work to do. And because, again, we don't go back to Brett and the police and everything, but it's difficult. Hi, Brett. But no, it's truly it's very challenging. So I think there is one element that perhaps we need to work together. How do we support the survival? Yes, challenging the status quo about where hate comes from, it's important, but at the same time, how do we support now, today? If someone comes to us today, I've been a victim of hate crime, besides the advocacy, how do we support them? And there are zero financial support for people that are experience hate crime. And I go back to what I was saying before, is that yes, there is some support from the DA here or there once the crime becomes recognizable and it's being reported, but there are a lot of people that suffer for years, which life has changed forever by the intimidations, the fear, and the possibility that could happen again. And our own people, brothers and sisters, also Arcelia was referring before, they just don't make it. Many of them die by suicide because they can't tolerate the pain, the emotional pain, and because they blame themselves for being in the wrong place at the wrong time at the wrong hours. And I think sometimes we leave that work to the official institutions to support them when it's something that we need to take care of ourselves, that we haven't done enough in terms of coming together to do that. So perhaps policy changing too, an idea that goes in that directions. And here in the county, we might have an opportunity to push for perhaps new legislative efforts where we can ask people to step in institution for a long time when people are suffering hate crimes, and also how we create a support system around them to support them on the long run. That could be one idea, but just to start the conversation, that's it.
So one of the things that we're doing, I'm doing this work with young people right now. So in October, we started a group where I have 5 Justice Fellows. So one for Southern California, one for Southwest Southern California, one for Central and whatever. And so we met in October, and one of the things that we talked about is, number one, saying what is acceptable. Because I hear people even here say, and Yusef said as well, as that even in our own communities, people don't realize or recognize what is acceptable. They might say the N-word to each other. They might do something else that other people, they can follow suit. So we have to be transparent about what is acceptable and holding them accountable for that. And then again, you have to support. I see a lot, and I'm gonna say it, in the African community, we don't always support one another. And that's a tragedy. So we have to be able to, whether it's somebody else in a different culture, whether it's whatever the same one, we have to be able to accept each other and give them that support. And that's going to be able to now change the narrative, because again, they see that it's not acceptable to say these things. And again, they just feel like, some of the kids say, well, I don't, it's in music, it's in songs, and why are you making a big deal of it? You say it to each other. We have to be able to say, no, it's not acceptable for anybody to say it, and nobody to be able to treat me less than you because I have the same blood, I have the same abilities, I have the same whatever. And so just holding them accountable, again, like I said, going back to that, that's going to be essential. And that's whether it's reporting, that's whether, again, getting alliances together, whether we're making spaces for this conversation to happen. But I think that's essential in any solution moving forward.
Hey, thank you, Satia. Is there any other of our panel members who would like to give them? Rosella, thank you.
I don't know if it's on.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share some of our approaches and strategies as kind of critical educators in our community. So one of the ways that as Universidad Popular, we are tackling some of these just monumental issues that we are facing is in 2 ways. So one is really trying to understand ourselves, kind of the bigger picture, and really the systems. And the other approach is to focus on individual, kind of on the ground efforts. And we've come to believe that it's really important to kind of keep those parallel processes happening. For the Latinx community, we are in a really critical kind of moment in history, particularly here in the border region. What I mean is that the Latinx community has such deep roots here in this geography, yet we are still omitted from the history books, what our kids are learning in schools. Our community is still seen as the interlopers, right? The people who jump the fence, right? The wetbacks, the undesirables here that can be disposed of when we're not needed to do labor. That's been our history here. What has been happening, particularly in the last 50 years, is that our community has been growing in numbers dramatically. In cities like Escondido, obviously Vista, Latinos now comprise over 50% of the population. And that puts us in a very interesting situation because those numbers simply don't translate into political power. So even though we're such a large percentage of the population, like, believe it or not, we are still invisible in our own communities. There are entire conversations that happen that don't take us into account, that continue to kind of put us in our place. And so for us thinking about, right, like this interesting moment in time where we are in some areas becoming the majority of the population, but Latinos are such a conundrum, right? Like, a lot of our society doesn't understand who we are. They don't understand where we come from. They don't understand our political status in this country. So the way that we've gone about increasing education in our community, that is the reason why we started Universidad Popular, is because we wanted to begin to create spaces to learn. And one of the things that is really important for us is that our own community that has had very limited access actually to formal education, because you know that we continue to be the most formally uneducated group, the ones with the least graduation access, right? Even college education. It's improving, but we still have a long ways to go. So what we wanted to do was really begin to open teaching spaces and classroom spaces, and this continues to be our vision, that in every Latino community, we want to have an Universidad Popular space where we are teaching politics, where we are teaching history, not just history from the traditional Eurocentric perspective, but we're actually teaching the history of the people of color in the United States, our own history. Right before COVID, I had almost 200 students showing up to attend our classes. We currently have about 75 who are enrolled in our evening classes. And these are classes that we created for the entire family. So we take on issues like the Holocaust. We teach about the Holocaust. We take field trips to the Museum of Tolerance. We want our community to understand other people's histories so that we're able to find that common ground. At the same time, our focus is really on building that empowerment so that we are able to stand up for other communities and in solidarity with other groups. We don't see our place being spokespeople for other communities, but certainly we understand when we're called to stand in solidarity with others. We want each community to have its own space, its own leadership, and really ability to speak. So thinking about what we think needs to be done for us, it's really basic. Like, we need to learn who we are as a people. We need our kids to learn that. We need our elders to learn that. We need to come together with other communities in shared space, shared learning, and in building a shared vision for our future. But for us, it begins with education.
Thank you, Dr. Nunes. I just want to add to that. You know, we talked about, Charlene said that the Holocaust was not even 100 years ago, less than 80 years ago. And still, our schools are not teaching those. You know, othering the Mexican community, the natives of California, we're othering them, we pushed them off the fence. And, you know, Manzanar was, the anniversary of Manzanar passed not too long ago. The Black community, the anti-Blackness, oh my God, the anti-Blackness that each of our spaces, you know, exist. The Chinese Exclusion Act, when our former president started talking about the Islamic communities or surveilling the Muslim predominant regions, we don't all congregate around the Muslim community, around the mosque. We live all over San Diego and California. So we're only 1.3% of the nation's population. 1.3%. The 98.7% cannot be afraid of 1.3%. Right? It doesn't make mathematical sense or logical sense for that matter. We can't even, as a Southern California Shura Council, we can't even agree on what day Eid is going to start or Ramadan is going to start. Forget about implementing Sharia law. We're not able to do such magnificent task ever. Let's just accept that. 1.3% of the people cannot make that happen for a nation. You know, we are not that many, as you know, Charlene said, we go to a meeting and we can't even decide on what the color of the paint is going to be outside. How are we going to be able to bring instrumental change? So don't be afraid of us. Our former president made us look like the boogeyman. And then that's what created a lot of the hate incidences. And then when he came in power, his first executive order was the Muslim ban. So yes, words and those notions matter, and brushing them aside like, oh, it's nothing, is only going to get us in further trouble. We have to take note of these hate incidences, hate words, because these are going to monument to a hate crime, where a hate incident, a property damage in Escondido, just down the freeway causes a life damage in Poway. So notifying these perpetrators we're watching you is so important, and I'm looking at the FBI and law enforcement for that. Putting you guys on blast has become our favorite activity today, so sorry about that. But one thing that you know, as a collective community, or as even the educational community, as Dr. Nunes said, is educating community members, educating not to be for us not to be vilified based on how we look, what we practice, what we eat. You know, my husband and I, our whole practice all the time was to make sure that our community members see Muslim Americans as just normal people. All we're trying to do is put a roof over our head, pay our mortgage, send our kid to school, and, you know, hopefully at the end of the day have some energy left to watch some TV. That's all we're trying to do, just like normal Americans. Muslim Americans are not odd, Jewish Americans not odd, Spanish Americans are not odd. We are an integral part of this community. The fabric of this nation is made up right here and beyond. Thank you.
To that question of what do we do about the hate, I think there's two types of people in this nation, and it might be my pessimism, but there are people who can be addressed with education. They can be fixed in their notions about what these people represent or what they're after or how they're deficient. And they can be educated out. Like, wow, I thought that they were the greatest source of crime in the nation. It seems like they're not, and I've been saying they are. I thought these people were after us and they had enough power to change the country, and they're not. And I thought they were. Those kind of people can be addressed, I found. Then there's the people, no matter how much data you give them, no matter how much education you give them, they're going to be the same people and they're going to do the same thing. Yeah. I think that those people are a smaller group, but they are there. They are there. And it's going to take generations to weed those people out, because we find that a lot of people that are hard-nosed bigots, their children are out there marching with us. Yeah. They got their fists in the air and they're waving the signs, so that we can evolve past with generational evolution out of this major version of hate that we have in this nation. So I like to deal with the people who can be educated. Some people want to go and they want to march against people who are like, no, you guys are just blankety blank or whatever, and you do blankety blank, and then we hate you no matter what you say, no matter what you do. They're not worth my time. Worth my time are the people who want to sit down and say, are you a jihadist? They're worth my time. They want to ask me, am I a jihadist? And I always mess with them and say yes, because I am actually, you know? And because they don't understand what jihad means, they take the definition from this country, who are not Muslims, on what jihad means. Just to come here with this sciatica I have on my leg is jihad from the car to here. It's just a struggle to get it. So jihad just means struggle. It doesn't mean fight, doesn't mean war. So when I say, yes, I'm a jihadist, they go, oh, you know. So those people, though, they took the time to sit down and say that. I've also had people come and say, well, instead of worrying about police crime against civilians, why don't you worry about black on black crime? And I always say to them, and hopefully you could say something similar. I always say to them, black people are not being paid to harm black people, by a large part. Law enforcement is getting paid by my money to kill my children. They're getting paid to stop me more than other people. They're getting paid for that. So there is no commitment. They didn't take an oath to save black people. Some people took an oath to protect. Some people took an oath. So they're not the same. That's apples and oranges. And then lastly, all people have that group on that group crime. Asian on Asian crime is higher than any other crime against them by other people. Black on black crime is higher than any other crime versus people. White on white crime is higher than any crime than any people against them, and so on and so forth. So when people get educated about those things, they say, wow, I thought that you guys were the problem. And education fixes some of that. When we see black and brown people as the recipients of welfare, and they look at it by percentage, then they have a wrong picture and it gives them some hate. But if you look at the raw number, if you took all African Americans off of welfare, we'd have a welfare problem still. Because black people by number are not the highest recipients of welfare. So then when people come in, they say, okay, I was taught this thing wrongly. And the attitudes I have towards these people are wrong. Some of them can be helped. Then we have the Christ churches. Then we have the Poway shootings. Then we have the mosque burnings. Then we have the young lady who was stabbed in her back and called the N-word in East County. We have those people. Sometimes they can't be helped. Now, I'm not saying throw them away. I'm saying I can't help them. I hope somebody else can help them. Some institutional reaction to what they did can help them. I've seen people who they got caught for the crime and then they changed their whole lives. Rehabilitated that way. I can't help them, but I am here to educate those who are willing to know. And I think that's the biggest way to affect hate in the community. Education is the biggest form.
I think it's really appropriate, given that we're closing out the election cycle for this year. But I think one other really important way that we can address and begin to create change is by electing political representatives that represent the values of our communities. We've seen the way that state kind of sanctioned campaigns have a detrimental effect and really trickle down. So for us, it has been important to really work with and identify and support elected leaders that are going to stand up and make decisions and really be proactive in leading these conversations and making change at that level. So that's a really important consideration for us as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, vote.
Yeah.
Vote.
Vote.
do any of the other panelists?
I'll just add just a couple quick
Yes,
things.
please.
Just, I totally agree about the political centers of power, and I think thinking about and even mapping where are other centers of power that are non-political, like we are a foundation, right? As in the philanthropy space, we have a lot of control over resources and very little accountability in our field. That's a whole other panel. But we are, and it's not just us, really consciously thinking about how to bring in, how to make space for those with lived experience and maybe not every academic credential to come into the philanthropy space, to be in the power, so to speak, tables, making important decisions about money. It's not only philanthropy, there are other fields that alongside the political that I think if we're really thoughtful about kind of power mapping and thinking about where are those influences that we need to really pay attention to that. I think listening like we are today, but like those with lived experience and being really comfortable with holding multiple narratives sort of at the same time is really, really important. And the more that, I'm not an educator, but the more we can teach those skill sets to young people, the better. And finally, and sort of animating what Max said, but I just want to say again and again, it just serves those who are trying to like subjugate, all of us to pit minority groups against each other. I think this like fight over who was more oppressed is a race to the bottom, and it only serves those who hold the kind of that power. And so it's hard sometimes, I'll admit, because we all are coming with our own generational traumas. It isn't just us. It's things that I can't explain that trigger me sometimes. But I really think that that's a very, very important strategy, because otherwise we're not going to be successful in the ultimate goal.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we will have some time for questions and answers from the audience, but I just have actually like one more question for the panel that I would like them all to address, and then we'll open up and you all have lots of opportunities to ask your questions of them. But I would just like to know from the panel, like, what do each of you hope that the audience is going to receive from this conversation and or let go of from all the things we've talked about today? Yeah, it doesn't have to go in chronological order, but
what I would hope that everyone who was able to be with us today takes with you, I think it's just the idea that we need to be inclusive, right? That it is about opening up a table that is big enough for everyone, because at one point or another, all of our communities have faced that marginalization. And it is the history of the United States. And being open and really willing to be part of that social experiment, right? That is inclusive, that is democratic. I would hope that there is interest in learning about each other's struggles and finding ways to come together. I really think we need to figure that out so that we are able to really grow the kind of democracy that we want to see in our society today, because it is under pressure, and we are living in a really critical moment in time that requires all of us coming together.
I think it's amazing that you took a few hours on a Saturday to come and listen to this. I really do, and I really appreciate it, and don't take it for granted. I really think it's amazing. So I would actually reverse the question if we had time and say, like, what do you want us to take away, or what can I take away from what motivated you to be here? I mean, I guess I would also just say, going back to that subject of power and influence, we all have people that we influence, and I think you're here. Think about those that you influence when you go to dinner tonight with friends. Are there a couple surprising things you can share, like the hijab isn't after all that hot, or maybe cold people like me and others should be taking a lesson from that, or whatever it is. Things you can share to kind of maybe debunk attitudes that might be out there, and think about the rippling effect that may have. I think being intentional about how you share what you heard today and in general is really, really important. But most of all, thank you for showing up.
Thank you. Being that I'm with the San Diego Anti-Hate Crimes Coalition, I definitely want you to take away to not misunderstand me. I want to say report, report, report. I want you to take to your family and friends that we need the numbers up to reflect what's actually going on in San Diego County. So please report, even if it feels futile, please report, no matter how minor it is. So also I want to add to that, to take away that we need everybody to stand up. We need everybody to activate. We saw the glorious activation during George Floyd, and my prediction during that time is that once the isolation and the bans of going to parks and beaches lift, the support for the Black community will drop, and it actually did. I want us to come back and say, even though we don't have other distractions now, we do have other distractions, but please get out there and support your marginalized communities. All of us can do it. And I want to say again, stand up, speak out, and report, report, report.
Next time I'm gonna see in another part, because every time I follow you, I just don't know. It's not the first time. Two things. I think the intentionality of this work. We all get a little bit defensive when we realize that we haven't done enough on something or that we could do better. And we need to be honest with ourselves about how much we still had to learn and how beautiful that journey is, because we do it with the intention about how much we don't know and how much we would like to know. The second thing, I just would like for our community for once to start taking credit of the things we've done, because sometimes people, when they show up in these spaces, they hear us always complaining about something and always racism, always violence, all real things every day, but I will invite you to look around you and see exactly how movements have changed so much in our society. Without going in the 60s and 80s, Black Lives Matter. And I always tell people, is they don't want us to connect the victories with the movements, otherwise we'll learn how to go in the streets. So that's the number one thing that usually system oppressions do. Do not ever connect that going in the streets has made actually a difference. We offer behavioral health at the LGBT Center, and I can't tell you the pain for years we had to experience of having to call 911 and having the police to show up in places when people were having mental health crisis. Violence over violence over violence. And the triggering was just terrifying for all of us, our staff. We needed to always do we need to call them? How do we go about? Well, because of the conversation around policing in the community, accountability, and yes, defining resources that don't go for the health and the support, but for the oppression of people, now the county has instituted in the past 2 years a mental health system where you call someone because it's in a mental health crisis, the doctors show up, not the police. And those are little things, but now we experience it every day how that reduced the impact of policing in our community when they're suffering the most. And that was because of the Black Lives Movement, because of going on the streets and pointing out the responsibilities of these institutions that harm our people deeply. So I want for all of us to look around through the pain and through the journey of discovering more, understanding that a lot has been done to do things better today and not just for the future, but even for today's people that are suffering in our community. And I just wanted to take away that, because every time we come together, we're happy to be together, but also we take notes of how much each one of them has done in this community for that change.
Well, a lot has been said and all said very well. I just want to summarize and emphasize that certainly reporting, vote, and also learn the coping skill. And again, just being mentioned about the mental health crisis. And I recently read an article, and I'd like to share with that how it can help us, our community as well. Because not everybody had the access to psychiatrists, and actually in some of the developing countries like in Africa and all that, they don't have enough mental health care to deal with all the people there. So they develop a community-based support system. They recruit some, like one instance, they recruit some grandmas and give them a little bit training and volunteer, and they sort of sit on a listening bench for people who wanted to come to listen to them and talk. And they do a control study with those who are being treated with professional psychiatrists alone, and compared to this community-based support listening system. And actually, the community-based support system work better and have less reverse to the symptom. So I feel that I'm going to, at least for my Asian community, that I'm going to start a sort of caring end, session, just because I learned that Asian community, due to this, all the stress of the anti-Asian hate, there are also mental health problem. And I would like to think that I can help support them that way and just share with you. Okay.
Thank you. So before I want you all to know how hard Angela and Thuyen have worked for this. That's one thing I do want you to know. Please, a round of applause for them. One very important thing I want, not just people here, but everywhere to know that we, as a collective, are not here because we have nothing better to do. we all do, and you all do too as well, right? But we show up continuously day after day because there is a need. And our communities of concern, each individual communities of concern that we are here representing, have been vilified, have been attacked, have been for decades, for generations in a lot of our instances. And because that voice, that resonating concern and voice from our communities has been absent, that's why it has pushed and pulled and brought us to this point where we feel like we need to show up. I mean, I know I spoke with Angela about this. I could choose to just curl up in my home and not get up ever. But I feel like I need to be here because what I need to say needs to be heard. It's not that I don't think you all know it, but it needs to be heard again and again. And everyone's concerns here have been very similar. And that's what I need people to understand, that this message, this reciprocity, this love that we are sharing here needs to be platformed, needs to be shared, needs to be talked about. And that's something that if we keep growing in a positive direction, there's no regression on this. We did come from an atmosphere of hate, and we still are there, but there's only light and sunlight and sunshine at the other end of this, if we all keep walking together in that direction. So that's what I want everyone to take away from this, is you are here, you're making a positive impact, keep making the positive impact, keep crossing those bounds of hate and overcoming all of that to a message of unity, inclusion. If you don't know something about somebody, let's just have a chat. Let's not presume. Right? And I know that and Yusuf addressed this, about addressing and notifying a hate crime. And we're not saying that the FBI is the only culprit in this. There's a lot of law enforcement agencies, or the law enforcement agencies are the only culprit on all of this. Within our communities also we see that, right? I'm not dismissing. So as long as when you build bridges with me and put me on a pedestal saying, oh, she's doing this work, do not forget to hold me accountable for anything wrong I've done also, right? I am as a Muslim community member standing here and saying I'm facing discrimination, blah, 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 all that stuff. But also do not forget to hold any discrimination that my community is hosting against other communities. And that's why accountability of each other with passion, with compassion, and with an intent to move forward is what we all need to walk away from this today. Woo.
You know, it's not fair being on this other end. You know, you're waiting, because as soon as somebody says something you're going to say, you think, well, oh, let me think of something else. And then you get to somebody, oh, dang, I think of something else. This has been the whole time here. But all I duly know that everything you're saying. But so what I would like everyone to take away today is be the example that you want to see, right? Advocate for somebody else that can't advocate for themselves. And yeah, we talked about voting, but educate what you're going to vote about. Don't just think it's about a president. I mean, you got your hospital boards, your school boards. I mean, everybody that's important in the community has a role. And like, I want to say, like, and this recent ballot, I don't know whoever got confused, but they had a bunch of judicial people in there, and I had no idea what they were doing. None. So we have to be responsible for that. The next time we just figure out, okay, who is actually in the role? Because I think everybody said either yes or no, or something like majority of people. But we could have possibly still put in the wrong person. You know, let the government that probably put somebody in there, but that's all a part of the system, because they're the ones in there making sure who they're gonna justice is served, and kids is going to jail, and in custody deaths that we talk about. We still got a whole mile about that. It's another panel for that. But those things are important, and we got to teach our kids those things. So again, what you've learned from us today, just by sharing in our testimonies, by sharing even your questions with each other, take that away and now be the advocate yourself, because it's going to take just us, more than us, to do this work. And so if you can internalize that and be at these school board meetings, the hospital board meetings, because our kids need you. And we can't be at every place. We just cannot. I mean, I represent 18 cities in North County. That's from Del Mar to San Clemente to on the 5, from Poway to Rainbow to Camp Pendleton, Florida. There is no way that my team and I could be at every meeting. We need you. We need you to make sure that the voices that are not being amplified, that you are now amplifying for us. And let us know, like I said, hold us accountable. We're not strangers. We can be right there, but we need help. And so being the advocate and just getting this information, now you're all responsible as well. Because we're gonna say, hey, you know, what we don't know, you have to be able to tell us. You have to be able to be in that space for us when we cannot be. So again, I'm gonna reiterate the voting. Of being accountable, being present, and being the example, because it starts with you. And I know a lot of people, when George Floyd happened, a lot of people who are not African American came up to me and said, what can we do? What can we do? And it's not so much that you can understand our struggle, it's that what you can do with the privilege that you have or have not. It's being there when the policies are coming down, and being there, these police academy, we had a police accountability task force, and we just try to make sure we're in the sheriff's department, wherever we can be, but you can do a lot more with that information. So I just definitely challenge you to do that.
I'm a little nervous now. I love all these people. I know that many of you came up to me and felt like you needed to give me a hug after that first round. I still love them because they fight the fight. You know, Max fights for my queer self, and my colleagues fight for my black son, who's just about to turn 13. They fight for my husband, who's Mexican American. So we're together. It may not seem like it all the time. So, but that doesn't mean that I don't need their help, and I don't need your help. I'm gonna go back to this, is that we need the help of all of you to come forward when you hear of these things. So I'm sorry, and I wish I could change all the years of the bad trust that has been built up between our communities, between my law enforcement community and our marginalized communities. But I can tell you that there are people in law enforcement who care. And so when you have someone who is afraid to come forward, just know you have a person in myself that you can come to, and I can find the right people. Maybe it's not something I can handle, but I can find the right person for you that will understand, that will do it with compassion and empathy and not with judgment and fear. And so I'm just asking you to take that away. There are people on your side, and you just have to find the right ones.
Can we give the mic just back to Brett real fast? Because can you just share, like I don't even think we talked about, but what's the best way that somebody can report a hate crime?
There's lots of ways. You can call me. My number's out there, and I'll gladly give you my information. Max has my information. I'll give these guys all of my information. bkalina@fbi.gov. It's real easy. But if you go to the website of any of your local law enforcement agencies, there are ways to do it also online. Sometimes you can even do it anonymously so that something might be reported, so that you just want to let law enforcement know. Maybe you just don't want them coming to you. That is also a possibility. And so get online, get to that agency, and if you're, again, uncomfortable with that, reach out to me and I will walk you through it.
So I also want to add, and we talked about the differences between hate crimes and hate incidences, and so one of the things that came out of the API equity budget is the funding to what is the launch, and it's currently a soft launch, so just to test it out, it will be a full launch for across the state here in the new year, but what's called California versus Hate. So in recognizing that hate incidences really are something that is a civil rights issues, and so there's a dedicated department within the state of California to handle that, and so it can be reported right now online, or the phone number for it is 833-8-NO-HATE, and so that is one way in which, for folks who don't want to really deal with law enforcement, it is a multilingual phone line, so barriers to language access is one of the things that prevents folks from reporting or sharing that information, but that's also, we'll be able to link folks to resources that will connect them, and I know that Max has talked about access to resources an issue, and within that, I'll do a plug for organizations who are in the room. If this is the work that you're already doing or existing and you want to explore ways in which your organization can increase that work or to begin some of that work, I'm happy to have one-on-one conversation with the launch of the grant in the news cycle at the end of the month or early December, both through the Stop the Hate grant, but the California Board of Education will also be launching something very similar within the schools. And so your school districts has the opportunity to apply to this grant. And so if you're talking about how you can engage with your school district and talk to them about how this funding can be brought down into your school districts in order for folks within the educational system can do with our youth. But our grant can also do that, and I know we get to work with wonderful folks like you all to really find what community-based solutions that work for you can be supported in this limited short-term funding, but really